All right, we're live.
We are live.
All right.
All right.
Amen. All right, good people. Wait for a few more people to join us.
Yeah, let's give it a few more minutes
Okay.
before we start. Are y'all in mine? Y'all are all in mine?
I don't know.
All right.
Yeah, I think I know I'm in yours.
I think I shared it. All right.
You did.
Yeah, I shared it too. So at least in the room, it's automatically coming up closed captioning.
Yeah.
All right. Hello. This is so exciting.
If people are logging on, we're just giving it a few more minutes to see more people join on. My stomach hurt. What?
You said what?
My stomach hurts
What?
right now.
It's fine.
This is a deep conversation.
It is. It really is.
A
It's
deep.
gonna be a good conversation.
Yeah. Two. All right, we might as well start before people start to leave out.
Awesome.
Closed captioning.
Sorry about that, y'all.
Cool. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Truth Be Told. This is the second episode of many more to come. I am Dr. Krah with Free Your Mind with Dr. K. And we have some others. I'll let my dear friends introduce themselves as well.
All right, I'm Highly Revered. I'm Brandon Davis. Most of you guys know me that. I have a podcast called Highly Revered.
And I am Zakiya with the Sankofa Xperience podcast.
And I'm Ken with the Ken's Corner podcast. Thank you for all joining us today.
So we wanted to take a moment to talk about fear in various aspects. But to kick it off, I want to share a poem that many of us know and are very familiar with. So our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, handsome, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to make manifest the glory of God within us. It is not just in some, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we consciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Marianne Williamson.
Well,
So, as you know, I think this particular topic is one that many of us, fear in general, is a challenging topic to talk about because many of us have faced it in various ways, or some of us have not. And one of the things, as Z read that quote, just really processing the fact that I would say in my own life, there have been times where I had fear of failing. But then once I kind of conquered or try to conquer that fear of failing, I started to regress into the fact, is it really failing that I'm afraid of, or is it the fear of success? And so for me, I have, I feel like I've overcome fear in many different ways. But once again, I think switching from failure to success has been definitely one of challenge. So that particular quote kind of draws out of me, like, am I afraid to succeed, and what that means and what comes with it? So I don't know, Ken, what do you think? What about how you responded or reacted to the quote?
I totally agree with you. Fear of success because of the responsibility that comes with success. And a lot of times that we struggle, or I'll struggle with my own self-esteem, even though I had the skills, the confidence, and the competence to make it to the level that I am. With that comes responsibility, and you don't want to let anybody down. It's easier sometimes not to even to really give your all. I call it safe auto. The safe auto theory, just give people the bare minimum, because with the bare minimum, it's not a lot expected of you. So therefore, again, the more you succeed, the more that responsibility, and that becomes very heavy at times.
Yeah, similar to Ken, I think for me, it ends up being a thing of when I start giving things at a certain level, it's that expectation of having to always achieve and meet that same level. And if I don't meet that level, then either I failed myself or I failed those who were looking for me, or those I may have helped along the way. So whatever I do is a thing of, if I achieve at the highest level, knowing I can go further, I can go higher because I have that ability. I'm competent enough to do so. But if I fall short, does that end up challenging or saying something different about either my character or my ability or my skill sets or whatever the case may be? Like, what narrative does that create around me and what I can do if I don't continue to achieve the same height of success?
I think for me, so just background on it. When we first came out with the quote, it was, first of all, it was like a God-given quote, because Krah sent it to us and was like, hey, look at this quote. And I'm like, well, Krah, I just put this quote in my intro. Like, it's my intro to my podcast now. Like, wow. So the conversation kind of just flowed from there for me. And I use the quote personally in my life. It was the reason why I did this podcast, to kind of get over that fear, or to face it, of expressing myself and letting people actually know who I am. And so that's been like a debilitating thing professionally and personally in my life, is having that fear, that block that stops me from continuing on, or stops me from expressing myself in both ways. Sometimes I come in a room and I'm afraid to be myself, and then sometimes I come in a room and I'm afraid not to be myself, and it kind of hits you from both aspects of what that is.
So for some of us, or just kind of as you all were sharing your personal kind of approach to even looking at the quote, or just fear in your life, would you say that fear was brought on to you by somebody else, like a not so much a threat, but someone saying, well, if you don't meet this, then you're going to be, or that kind of thing? Or do you say that fear arrived internally for you? So was it external fear induced, or internal?
Both in some ways, because when we all grow up, we've let people down before. and we haven't succeeded, or we've attempted something and haven't reached the measure of success that we wanted. So therefore, we know what that feeling is like. So not to be disappointed or disappoint people again, then that's something that can grow and fester unless you have a great support group who are, and some self-motivation for people to continue to, motivate you, and you motivate yourself. I think sometimes it's both, and it can both work equally as strong.
So for me, fear is always internal, right? So for me, fear is an emotion, and it's that warning sign that whether it's real or not real externally, it's that thing in my head that says, I don't know what's going on, I'm not in control. And it's can be a good thing. I come in the room and I have that fear and I go, let me be cautious. And then it can be the bad sign. I'm coming in a room and I'm cautious and there's nothing for me to be afraid of. Like, does the dog have teeth? Is he barking because he wants to bite, or is he barking because he wants to get your attention? You never really know until you face it, right? And so it's always an internal thing that I bring with me, my preconceived notions of what's going on. Whether it's real or it's not real, whether the person is against me or the person is for me, I already come in with a fear that I have from my experience in my past or in my life that tell me what's going on, whether that's the case or not.
And a lot of it is, it is definitely a both. As Ken said, it's internal, but it's also external, depending on the situation. Because a part of me, in some aspects, where my fear stems from is the expectation of having to show up in certain spaces. So being able to actually be myself authentically, I'm afraid to be myself because in past me doing so, that has caused some rifts. But then at the same time, if I don't show up and be myself, then am I limiting my ability to move forward or make connections because people can't really see who I am? But then there are other aspects of my life to where the fear is, who am I not to show up? It goes back to the quote, like, who am I not to do certain things? Who am I not to step into my greatness? Who am I not to show up for other individuals? Who am I not to be an advocate for something? So then it becomes that expectation, like, well, because I have a responsibility to do so, will I fail someone because I either don't do it to the magnitude I am expected to, or not to the magnitude that actually makes an impact? It's just a lot of the preconceived notions, as Brandon was saying, definitely trickles in and makes you start questioning a lot of different things that impact the influence of fear within you.
And if I could interject this on what you just said, Zakiya, I was actually talking to my wife about that today. A lot of times we think about what other people are thinking as opposed to what actually really is.
Yeah.
And so therefore we get that fear comes in because I don't want to come into the space because I don't have my PhD that I think that Dr. Krah is going to look at me wrong. She may be thinking something totally different, but because I'm trying to think for other people, a lot of times that's where the internal strife and struggle comes in, that fear, and it halts you from really, like you said, showing up in that space and being your authentic self.
And I love what all of you have said, because Brandon had touched on something that really kind of it perked me. And you had made a statement, or you said something about fear and choice. I think what I've learned over time is that in some situations, fear is a choice. Now, that is not in everything, because I know we will get there at some point tonight, but I've seen in my own life where I have either chosen fear or I have rejected fear. And I see that day in and day out as I walk into different meetings and different spaces. I was literally thinking about this yesterday. I had this meeting at the end of the day with my supervisor, and I was going in to make a request for something that I know that I earned and something I knew that was equitable and fair for me to have. But as I was thinking about it throughout the day, I was like, okay, so what if he says no? What if he doesn't understand? What if I have to toss out all this evidence that I have shown up, da, 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 da. And then all of a sudden I said, Stephanie, why are you choosing to think these things? Why are you already kind of, as you all said, why are you already going in and having the full-fledged conversation that hasn't even taken place yet? So in that moment, I had to choose not to fear. I had to choose not to accept fear. One of the things that I know I'm going to quickly go into this quote and come back, because I know that we're going to get here. When you said about choice, it made me think of a quote. If y'all are okay with me sharing
Yeah.
a quote. Okay. So in After Earth, some of us have seen that movie with Will Smith and his son. And one of the aspects of the quote, he says to his son, "Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is the product of our imagination. It's a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity." And when I thought about that, it goes directly into what Ken said. Like, I had conceived something in my mind that doesn't even exist yet, gave it life, and then allowed for it to attach onto me and walk around with me. I mean, when you really stop and think about that, it's almost like, man, that is insane. Like, I gave birth to something that didn't even exist before it even entered my mind. Now, there could have been past circumstances that I allowed to kind of attach to that current situation and say, well, in the past, this is what happened when I did this, or in the past, this is what somebody said when I did this. And so now I'm giving life to something in the future that my past, that existed in my past. So that just really about the choice of fear. And are we choosing that versus rejecting it?
Yeah, and I'm 100% with you. I think, a lot of times I've done things or maneuvered in ways in my life because I already made an assumption. I had a fear that, hey, you know what, when I go in this room, I'm not going to really say much at this table because these people are going to think I'm stupid. These people are judging me. And so I just need to shut up and be quiet. And you got to know that when I go in the room, I typically don't say much until after everything's over when I get up. But then I come in there and I'm judging them, thinking that they're judging me.
Mm-hmm.
So I lose out on opportunities. And there's even, when I was looking a long time ago, when I was looking for jobs, I was applying to jobs that I knew I could get versus applying for jobs that I really wanted. So I was applying for things that were lesser than what I knew I was capable of doing, what I knew I was qualified for, because my fear told me if I apply for this, they're going to look at me and they're going to say, you're not the right person for this job. You're not capable of doing this. So don't waste your time on trying to apply for that. And those things set you back. Like, fear is debilitating. It stops you and it hinders your life.
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure.
So, are there ways that we have used fear as motivation? Because that's one thing that I have done where to try to overcome letting fear have a place in my life. I'll actually recognize it, acknowledge it, but then use that as a motivation to do something that to me is it's scary. It's a brand new experience. It may be something unfamiliar. I may not have much knowledge about it, but yet I'm gonna push through and figure it out.
I think for me, I have I've tried to take away the power of fear, like by not even calling it fear. That may sound really weird, but looking at it as opportunity. That is something new for me to step into, versus if I continue to identify something or call something by a name, then I'm giving it life. So saying to something like, man, that's a fearful situation. Am I going to step into it? Am I going to walk into it? Am I going to be motivated? Or do I see it? Man, that is an opportunity I never even considered for myself. I can see where there could be challenges, but I'm going to step into it. So I've tried to take even the naming of it as such, because I didn't want to give it life. So more so like, this is a new opportunity. This is a new chance for me to do something different, and really literally trying to remove any sort of authority of it by not even calling it by name. That may sound really interesting. And it's more so, I guess, I'm going to draw there. It's more of a spiritual aspect as well. Like, the moment you name something, the moment you put it upon your lips and call it so, you have now giving it a life. And I choose not in certain situations to give fear life. So I don't even call it a fearful thing. I'm like, this is opportunity. This is a new challenge. Let's go ahead and step in, or let's not. So that's been an approach I'm starting to use in my life.
And I think from the question I was asking, it's more so when you feel the emotion. So you may not name it, but it's something there when you recognize it. It's something there that could deter you from either moving forward or it could create that second guessing of whether or not this is for you or whatever the case may be. So it definitely not giving it an actual name is great, but at sometimes for some people it's you still can't avoid the emotion. You have to acknowledge that there's something that's within you that creates a reaction, and that reaction could end up being something that will prevent you from moving forward.
Yeah, to answer hopefully I'm answering your question specifically. It is, I believe, going back to what you've rehearsed in your head, what you think somebody else is thinking. So like you said, the emotion is there. Yes, right now I'm currently applying for jobs, and I'm glad Brandon used that's a great example. And I have not applied for jobs that I know that I qualify, like I know it, but in my mind, because I may be missing one thing, that they'll throw my whole thing out, and then I don't apply at all because I am scared to get that email back of saying no, thank you, but no thank you, because I've gotten several of those emails. And so you're right, the emotion does come out, but then you start rehearsing with Zakiya is thinking on the whole other side of the world, and she may not even be thinking that. And sometimes we can, and I can make this spiritual also, sometimes we can miss a blessing because we rehearsed the whole scenario in our head that hasn't even happened. And so, like you said, how do we have the emotion, which is real, and then what is it that we click and say, okay, well, even though I have this emotion, I'm still going to take this step out the plane. It kind of goes with Will Smith, and this is one of my frat brothers told me this. And when I saw the video, it changed my life. When Will Smith first jumped out the plane, he said the scariest part was just standing on the edge, but once you take the jump, everything else is cool. And so that's the part, like we standing right there on that edge of whatever precipice that we're, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, whether it's anything else. But once we take the step, like everything else, the fall wasn't as bad. So it's that, how, within each and every last one of us getting past that whatever that is. I can't describe, I'm not a doctor, so I can't describe what that is, getting past that emotion to go ahead and keep forward.
So for me, my tactic in conquering fear is the complete opposite of what Krah said. So I am identifying this is fear. Like, hey, you know what? Let me stop where I'm at and call a spade a spade. This is fear. And once I can recognize that, you know what, I'm scared of something, I can call it and say, this is what it is. Then I'm able to face it and say, you know what, actually, I can think for myself and know, I don't necessarily know what's going to happen. I don't know. I'm judging them just like they're judging me. So let me go ahead and conquer this. Let me go ahead and face this and just, take that risk. Take the risk of being judged. Take the risk of being shut down. Take the risk of that door being closed. I know for a fact I'm confident in myself. Once you're confident in your abilities, then professionally, you're able to go out and say, regardless of what you guys say, if you say no, if the door is shut, if you judge me, if I'm not accepted, I know that I'm valued. I know what my worth is, and I know there's something else, right? So go ahead and say no. I'm glad you said no, because now I know not to go to you no more. I can go somewhere else and get my yes.
Mm-hmm. And I think back to my initial comment, for me, I know enough about myself. The moment I name it, I give life to it. So it's not even the fact that I'm not acknowledging it, but if I name it and call it out, fear, then all of a sudden my mind is going in this whole entire trail, and I will go on a rabbit hole that then takes me twice as longer to get back. So I don't want to create the picture that I'm avoiding or not acknowledging what it is. It's just to myself, if I call it out as so, then I know I've given life to it, and it becomes literally something I carry with me. And so that's something I've had to learn how to do in just making sure I'm mindful of my words and what I personally decide to speak out of my mouth or things like that. And so that's just something that, once again, that's just something I know enough. I'm learning more about myself on how to be mindful of that. So as we have gone into this reflective aspect of fear and how we've overcome some various challenges, going to that external aspect. So as we know that there are times where fear and the experience of it has nothing to do with your internal decision or choice to control, because somebody else outside of you may be either putting you in certain circumstances or in situations, or you find yourself in those particular circumstances and situations. So can anyone share a little bit? And as we can see that permeating in our world right now. So how do we all make sense of that kind of fear, the fear that you can't control? Or can you? Can you still control it even though it's happening external of you?
For me, as a father, as a husband, it's you can't control it, and that is the scariest part of it. Is when you actually come to grips with, I cannot control anything that's going around me. You know, you have a situation where, you know, one of my sons, he's older and he wants to go out and he wants to hang out with his friends. He wants to do that. And it's a thing where I'm at the dinner table and I'm reminiscing about all the stuff that I used to do, and I wasn't scared to do it. But now I'm scared to let my son just do a little bit less because of the imagery and the things that has been, you know, we've been inundated with all of this information and visuals. And so for me, I know I can't keep him in the bubble because the only way he's going to live life is to experience it. However, it's the fact that because I can't control it, and I know in my mind there's nothing I can do. I teach him to say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, great student, 3.6, athlete, all of that. But at the end of the day, if somebody want to do something to him with a gun or anything like that, there's nothing that he can do to control. Like there's nothing, unless I'm standing right there, there's nothing that I can do to control that. And that's hard. And that's something that, you know, every day, literally, especially with everything that's going on in the nation and in the world, it's really come to the forefront of my mind. And it's really hard to navigate
that. So I think, so I kind of said earlier, I feel like fear is not external. It's something that I bring with me. And especially for me, it comes from insecurities or things that happened in my past. So the fear was already there. You either activate it or you manipulate it, but you didn't bring it. I brought it. And so it's something that I caused. I think we live now in a time where fear is on the rampage. And so everybody is kind of stuck dealing with their fear and it's being manipulated. You watching the news, you're seeing all day long what's happening. You're seeing people shot and you're seeing people killed. And I'm not saying manipulating the way that's not real. That's not happening. But it activates the fear that I have. I was already scared of police. I was already scared that I was going to get shot. And now all I can see, all I can talk about, all I can hear is this conversation. And it's a good conversation to have, but it puts me in a place where now I am extremely nervous and cautious. I'm going outside, and we were kind of talking earlier offline about coworkers. I'm scared to have a conversation with the coworker because I don't know where this conversation is going to go. You know, are you going to go left with this? Are you going to go right with this? Are you going to come to me and say, hey, I'm a Trump supporter, all lives matter, and now I got to defend myself? Like, where are we going with this? And so it leaves you walking in kind of eggshells and maneuvering again in that fear and saying, you know, I don't want to deal with this, or I want to act this way, or I want to stay out of this space, just because you are scared. You don't know.
I like what you said, Brandon. So let me ask you this question, because there are certain, like I you know, for me, like if I go to any city, the first place I'm going to the hood because I'm comfortable there. Like I'm very comfortable going to any city, any hood. But what's hard for me is the fact that I can't have my kids in that situation.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a control over that. So when you're talking about bringing fear, how would you do it, you know, as far as, you know, a nephew, a cousin, or somebody that you don't have control over what happens to them?
How would I do it?
Yeah, how do you navigate your fear, or do you have fear in that way?
So for me, I'm the opposite. So I've lived in every different place. So I've lived in the hood, I've lived in the suburbs, lived in a rural area. So I've had all those experiences. I am not the most comfortable in the hood. Take me to the classy place. I'm not, give me a bottle of Riesling or something. That's my stilo. But I'm comfortable enough where I can go to the hood and just be me and I'm cool. I think for me, I have a realization of what's going on and I can, communicate that, and I'm confident in myself, my skills. I can shoot. I'm good. I'm good talking. Like if I'm taking my godson somewhere, I don't have the issue as long as he's with me. Now the conversation comes if when I'm not there, do I have that fear? And yeah, I do. So the situation came up. So I had my godson one time. We went to Myers and we ran into, I don't know if he was homeless or not. I doubt it, but he was like standing outside and he was trying to get money and selling CDs. And for me, that, nothing. It's the hood I walked. And it wasn't nothing to him, but he made a comment about it, about him being outside. And I had a whole conversation there. Like, let me stop and talk to you about what this man is really doing. Let me talk to you about, he's just trying to make money. He's out here. It's cold. He's not out here because he wants to be out here. He's out here just because he's trying to make some money. And this is the only way he knows how to do it, right? He doesn't know the other options. This was the best option to him from where he's been. And so that conversation, having it, and I believe in having those conversations as you go. I talked to one of my coworkers a lot. I really hope she's not watching. All right, but I talked to one of my coworkers a lot about, she's Caucasian. We're really, really close, and we talk about everything. We talk about Trump, we talk about politics, we talk about everything. But she lives in a neighborhood where when she was talking to me, she was talking about when people outside of their neighborhood come in, they call the police. Like, if a stranger walks into her neighborhood she doesn't know, not saying her, she does it, but they have a group and they immediately call the police, like, come get this person out. And so, my reaction could have been like, wait a minute now, you can't do that. But my reaction was, okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what was that person doing? It's like, well, I don't know. Okay, well, let's hold off on calling the police. And so that conversation, the next time we had a pleasant conversation, she called me, was like, there's a guy outside right now trying to sell something. It's like, okay, listen, COVID's going on. People don't have money right now. I'm sure he's just outside trying to make money. What's he doing? Nothing. Just let him be. Let him be. Call me if you feel like you're nervous about something. Call me if it gets close to you. But those are the conversations that we kind of have to have in order to change that mindset and in order to face the fear. Because like with her, that fear didn't come from the guy that was in the neighborhood. That fear came from already within her. She already had that perceived message from how she was raised, where she comes from. But because when he came, he activated it. He activated the fear that was already in her heart, already in her mind. And so that conversation, and I believe you have it with everybody, and say, like, this is what this is. Let's take a step back and let's do an analysis on what's in the dark room, right? What could be in the dark room? Have you been in this dark room before? Yeah. So there's a couch over here, there's a chair over here. You've been there before. What's underneath your bed? Is there really a monster underneath your bed? Most likely not. It's a box of shoes down there. And having that capacity to have that conversation.
Come on, Brandon.
Here y'all go.
Come on, give me all the light, Brandon Davis. I love the way that you, like, the narrative about your coworker, because a part of me, as you were talking, wanted to ask the question, like, at what point is that not your responsibility to educate her whether or not her fear is real, should be activated or manipulated? Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that's a perfect thing. I think that's a good thing. But at what point does she, at what point do people have to arrive? Like, is it going to be your responsibility to teach her? Is that your responsibility? I mean,
is it my responsibility? No, it's not Brandon Davis's responsibility to do that. However, if I don't, then I add to what we already see going on in the world. If I don't have that conversation, then, that whoever this person is, whether it's my coworker, whether it's her neighbor, that person will continue to never know. They'll never go outside and speak to that person who was trying to sell stuff at their door. They're never going to go there and do that. So I don't believe I have to. Like, I don't believe I don't believe it's my responsibility at all. But I do believe that Brandon Davis, want to add to the culture. I want to make this a better environment. And so because I want to do that, because I want, my godson, because I want nephews and nieces to be able to play outside and not have fear. I don't want to be scared of the cops. Then somebody has to. Somebody in your life has to have that conversation with you. And I think that's really the ill part of everything, is that nobody ever really has a conversation from the other side. You never talk to somebody who's not in your already in your community, right? We never sit down and have that conversation about race. It's really, touch and go. Don't say too much because you don't know what to say. You don't know how somebody's going to feel. They're going to get offended. But it takes, facing that fear and saying, let's actually sit down and let's have a conversation about it. Let's talk about what the issues are, how you perceive things. Why do you feel it this way? And then let's look at, what it really is. Can we change this? Is this your mindset, or is this really what it is? Is this person really going to attack you? You don't really believe that. You're just nervous.
But I think that also shows up in various ways too. So like the responsibility to teach someone else about what their role could be can be exhausting. So when you do that day in, day out, there are people who do like the social justice work, do the diversity and inclusion work, or just actually have really good friends and colleagues who want to learn, and they become the voice of the Black community. After a while, it becomes exhausting. So after a while, it's like, I don't want to be the person having this conversation, teaching you and explaining to you why we feel this way. I don't think at this point, I can speak for myself. At this point, there really is no reason that any person who is not Black in this country can really ask a question in regards to like, why are Black people upset? Unless you have lived under a rock or you're under a certain age, there really is no reason why you don't know. If you have not paid attention, I don't know how you haven't paid attention. And I could also be more so like, yeah, I'm that Black person. So to a lot of the stuff that's going on is happening in my community. So of course, majority of the people I talk to, socialize with, hang around, we're having these conversations. And for many of us, we're having them around other individuals who are non-Black or non-people of color. And we end up being exhausted of having the same dialogue over and over again. On the flip side, where I would like to see is us having this conversation with law enforcement when it comes to law enforcement violence against Black community. I don't know if that's happening. And I'm saying that because I have not seen that where we can honestly have a sit-down conversation with our police departments or our sheriff departments about how they actually engage with certain communities. I've heard about it. I have never seen it. So even thinking about like for my experience being pulled over and being afraid to stop in a rural community by a white police officer that has a history of violence against Black people or even racism, I refused because I was afraid something would happen to me. I don't recall, and it could have happened. I don't recall that community ever having a conversation of how do we heal historical, generational trauma and violence between the law enforcement, that system, and the majority Black community that was in that environment, in that area. So I think a lot of it becomes of, are we tired of having conversations that we've been having for over 50 years, over 100 years, and so on and so forth? But then are we really having the conversation with the people that really need to be part of the conversation?
So I have this quote tatted on my arm, and it says, "He who learns, teach." And for me, everything that everybody is saying is 100% correct. As human beings, we become tired. However, just like Brandon said, I have kids who have to navigate this world when I'm not here. And so even, we all worked in higher education, and our passion was so great because we knew that these were the people or the leaders of the future. And I comically say, the reason why I'm on kids or I'm around kids so much, because one day y'all gonna vote. And y'all gonna vote on policy that's gonna affect me when I'm old. So I need to be in that situation. I was looking at Killer Mike, who's one of my role models, and in his special on Netflix, he was in a class and a little white kid, kept raising his hand trying to be more predominant, and so he was like, no, he had that real conversation, like Brandon said, in real time with them. He said, so once a little kid understood, he said, now you're an ally. And so one of the things that is heavy on us as, as I like to say, descendants of Africans who were brought here against our will to America through chattel slavery, we have to continue to carry that weight. Because if, like Brandon said, if I'm not that representative, then it's going to continue to perpetuate that fear internal that next person has. And so for what I do, again, I live in a rural community, majority white. There's only 2 black people on my whole block. But what they can always say is that this guy right here, whatever, and my neighbor stay across the street from me, Trump supporter and everything, fly their Trump flag and everything, but they speak to me every morning. Speak. Hey, that guy cuts his grass all the time. He makes sure his yard is clean. So any perceptions that he had, at least there was one person of color that he could point to and say, you know what, he went against what I thought. And so a lot of times when you have that particular mindset or that particular action, you can help change the world. However, after a while, we become tired. And sometimes it is, look, you got to get a book. You got to go on YouTube. You got to do something else. And like Brandon said, or I forgot who said it, let's talk to people outside of your community that you're just comfortable with. And it's okay to have those challenging conversations. I'm not going to kill you over your conversation, but let's have them.
So I want to add, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brandon. No, go ahead.
So, because I saw this comment come up about it being 100% their responsibility to do the research. And so I'm going to pose that a little differently. We don't do that with anything else. There's nothing else that we say it's 100% somebody's responsibility to do their research. If you don't want to learn, we have to go to school. You have to learn. There's things that you want to do on your own, yes, but it's not your responsibility. I don't want to say it's not your responsibility, but if I don't know if I don't come from that community, then I don't necessarily know to go outside my box and look. And I'm not looking to do that. What if my research was only Fox News? Like, my parents watch Fox News, so everything I learned came from, what's the name, Sean Hannity. So it doesn't help if we don't go in and say, like, let me add to this conversation. And then I don't want this to go too deep, but
Truth be told,
we have to have advocates in the other community. Nothing has ever changed without having advocates in the other community. Black people didn't end slavery. Like, we didn't come in and end it. We had advocates who came in and fought a war. I'm not saying we weren't a part of it, but there were other people who advocated and came on this side. So if we really want to make change, if we really want to do that, then we have to be the people to go out and build those advocates, to build those relationships, to let people actually see who we are, what it's like. This is what the Black lives look like. Listen, I know I wear a hoodie, but I'm not trying to rob you, And I have to teach you that. Somebody has to teach you that. If I'm just expecting that you get up one morning and say, you know what, today I'm gonna learn about the hood. That's never gonna happen. It's never gonna happen, and we're gonna be stuck where we are.
It comes to it's a book called Tribes. I recommend everybody read it. It's called Tribes. And one of the things that we are and Brandon said it perfect. We're now in a state, and I call it, I've heard this term and I like using it now. We're in hyper tribalism. And so we're all surrounding ourselves what we're most comfortable with. And even going back to higher education, even if you go to a PWI, most Black people hang out with other Black people. Very rarely do they actually go and sit with another tribe. They never really go. They still hang around each other. And so therefore, if you never take that opportunity to learn, because I saw in the comments somebody said, give them a book, give them titles. I'm all for that. I do. I'm not going to read it to you. I am going to give you titles and books, and you have to go out and do it for yourself. However, it's a tricky dynamic, because just like Brandon said, if I only stay, as much as I love Cleveland 216 to the day I die, if the only thing I ever knew was 93rd and Buckeye, I would not be where I am today. I had to take that lesson and use those lessons in the different areas of life that I am. But that's the only thing that I've ever done. And we've all come from different cities and environments. But when you go back, and I'm not talking down on nobody, but for whatever reason, choices, fear, whatever, if a person never experienced life outside of their environment, their worldview is just that until somebody come back in. Just like, I'm a cook. Where I grew up, you burnt your steak all the time. Well done, burnt. It wasn't until I went to another environment and learned that, wait a minute, a medium steak actually tastes better.
Yeah.
Wow, it blew my mind. But that was the only thing I knew until somebody had to educate me and say, hey, why don't you try this? And then I had to be willing to try it. So it's the same process. I know I made it simple with food, but it's the same process of getting to know one another and helping making change and building those relationships throughout the world.
Yeah. I want to go back. The 100% part that was one of those, it was a trigger for me because I'm like, I'm not going to teach you. I'll tell you, I'll share the information with you, but it is your responsibility to go and do the actual research. And I'm going to use it for an example. I have a colleague who, she's white and she actually has adopted kids of color. And she was sharing me with an incident in a school where the daughter had some issues where it felt like she was being pushed into being this unruly. And I had to share with her the book Push Out in regards to how our systems naturally criminalize young girls, young Black females, and they end up becoming part of the system. It's part of that whole school to prison pipeline thing that we created some years ago. And it was at that point, I'm going to share with you resources. I'm not going to sit here and give you a full out lesson on how to identify or how to be an advocate and prevent those behaviors happening to your child. I'm going to give you book titles. I'm going to give you scholars who's doing the research. I'm going to give you information for you to continue to educate. I don't mind sharing information. I'm not going to be your professor to where every time something happens, we are having office hours where I'm discussing with you the impact of systemic racism and oppression and everything else that happens within this society. I'm going to give you context and give you some people to go look at and read and also formulate your own opinion. So even though I'm giving you this information, I don't want you to make your opinion based off what I'm telling you, because my experience as a Black woman from the city of Cleveland is going to be totally different than a white woman from Iowa. Like, it's not going to be the same thing. So I need you to go read and create your own context of what's happening. And if you want to be an ally or an advocate, do it based off of what you're able to do from your own ideas and concept.
I think one of the things, and I kind of go back reflecting with everyone's comments and reflecting back what Brandon said, it made me think of the notion that if I have a heart attack, I'm going to a cardiologist. The cardiologist is not going to tell me go read the book, because if I read the book, I'm going to have my own interpretation. I didn't had a hole, something. I didn't came in. I got a hole in my heart. I got all this stuff because you gave me a book and told me to go read it. But you're the expert. Now, I'm not saying that you as the Black person in your office of white people that you are the expert, but is truly saying go read a book and form your own opinion. Like, it's almost like go read this and then you interpret. If you don't interpret within the right frame, you're going to misinterpret it, and you're about to go out here and engage based on what you interpreted. But it's like you're not necessarily seeing it from the right lens. So I mean, I do agree with what everyone's saying. I'm just torn by, as Brandon said, there's not other places in life that we would say go read a book and figure it out, because there is some people that do have more expert knowledge on that thing. So yeah, read a book and let's come back and talk about what you understood. Because if think about some of the books that you would refer to somebody. If somebody just read that book, Black and White, just read the words, do we really fully want for them to interpret it in a certain way and go out and then do whatever? I think that there's some things like we may want to give a little bit more guidance. So I'm going to be honest. I'm a person that's torn about whether or not educate, give you a book, whatever the case, because your interpretation of what I give you can cause you, and I'm not, once again, that's why I'm torn about it. I'm not responsible for your behavior and what you do with information. But if my conversation with you tells me that you've been irresponsible with some other information, how can I expect you to be responsible with something else? And once again, like I said, I'm torn. So I may be talking in circles. I'm just like, ugh. Like I said earlier, I talked. There was a conversation I was a part of recently, earlier this week, and this woman was saying about her teaching her white son certain things. I'm like, in my mind, I'm challenged by how you act. So where are you teaching him? Because if you teaching him the way you act, I don't want you teaching him. Like that's wrong for me to say. I don't want you teaching your own child. But I'm like, your context, what you read, is jacked up. I've sat in a lot of meetings where people have read a lot of articles, and therefore that's how they are determining certain things, whether it's, about a certain community or somebody has been raised in a poor neighborhood, that their intelligence level or their IQ is not at a certain thing. That's because of what you read. You're now putting everything through that lens, which is wrong. So I don't want you reading the article and then interpreting it and having a certain narrative, because somebody's going to listen to your narrative and you're off because of what you read. So I'm balancing that notion of what really role I need to play in certain situations, or do I leave you at your B, and do I leave you at your space? You read something and then you're now the person that's voicing what you read, which is you to miss the whole point, and you spewing stuff irresponsibly. So I'm just, that's my truth. I'm torn.
I think to tie it back into fear, because I don't want us to lose track of to fear, you wanting to show up and it goes back to what Zakiya said earlier. You're in a space where, and I'm not saying, sometimes fear can cause confusion of whether or not you really want the real Dr. Stephanie Krah to show up in that particular situation. And so again, that's how, going back to fearing, there, and the more I'm thinking about, I like what Brandon says. What is stopping you from having that real conversation? What is inside? What fear did you bring into that space that is stopping you from articulating correctly? Because you, Dr. Krah, have a mastery of words and how to say things, and you're eloquent. But however, that duality, because there's something fearful, like, okay, if I really say what I want to say, is she gonna really take it the way what I'm saying? So it goes back to tying into that fear. And it's really, it could be so exhausting, because it's literally almost like a every second conversation. As a person who's been married 17 years, and just even today, it's a conversations that I have to think like, okay, do I really want to say this how I want to say it? That's a fear, because I don't know. Yeah, you've known me for 20 years, but sometimes when the real Ken shows up, people that's even close to me be like, whoa. So it's like Brandon said, that internal thing that you fight that has you like, yeah, of course, I can give you the book, but also I got to be a teacher. But how does Stephanie Krah, Dr. Krah, what Dr. Krah is going to show up, and what is fearful inside of me that's preventing that from happening?
These are facts. You are so right. Because in that meeting, I was like, okay, even though I'm staying at my mama's house, I'm not trying to make this permanent. So it's also knowing the right time. Mm-hmm. Because it's like in conversations, like I'm sure many of us have had this week, whether it's in office spaces, with friends, on Facebook, whatever the case may be, it's like this moment of, I'm processing how I feel. Now you're in this space telling me how you feel, and you're feeling bad by what you're seeing. And I'm like, okay, as I'm trying to figure out how I feel, do I want to take this moment to educate you? But if I educate you in the way I want to, you may not hear what I'm saying. You may hear my emotion. Then you're like, oh yes, Stephanie, I'm so sorry. Like, no, don't go there. I don't need you to apologize in that space, in that way, because my response to you wanting me to reflect in this moment, I don't want you to do that pity thing. Like you're pitying my feelings. No, I don't need you to pity me. I don't know. It was just one of those moments. It was not the right time to give her what she really was processing. One, it was not professionally the right time. I didn't sense that. Nor I didn't know how to feel about her reaction, because I was also having some, like I said, I was processing my own feelings, but then I was also processing what I heard her say. And I'm like, okay. In that moment, it's just to be quiet, because nothing good is going to come from me. And that's the one thing I'm always mindful of. If nothing good is going to come from me in that moment, then let me not say anything, and I will come back to it when it needs to come back around. And so I think for me, it was a timing thing, and not also losing my job if I went off and flipped the table. And that's another thing. The fear, kid, as you said, why do I have to fear I'm going to lose my job? Because when she go and cut up, she ain't never fearful. People will be reckless at the mouth, but why do I have to be concerned I'm going to lose my job if I do the same thing that she did? So you're right.
I think also kind of clarify what Stephanie's talking about, like giving people the resources and having them just go out and make their own opinion. So I will say this: those who reach out to me and want to know more, they know they can come back and we can have a conversation and process what they read. So that way they aren't going out there haphazardly and just doing things based off what they have read. The individuals that I also share resources with, they typically have a real curiosity of like, I really want to be a better person. So how do I become a better person or become a better ally or become a better advocate if I don't know what I don't know? So even sharing with them the information, these are also like researchers by practice, by training, to where they're going to continue to keep researching because I've given them that nugget. They're going to continue to keep going and say, okay, I need to know more. And it can't just be off of this one article or this one book or it's even one experience. So I do understand what you're saying, like Steph, like you can't just give people information to say, here, now go be an advocate and you've only read one book. Like you're going to now be an advocate and go help the Black community after you read Cornel West. Like it's so much more out there that talks about our experiences. And again, we're not a monolith. So even though you read one book, that may not be my experience. So you can't apply what you read in that one book or that one article to me and say, I'm going to be an advocate for you. I don't need you to be an advocate. Like if you know me, don't be an advocate for me in certain spaces. Go be an advocate in what you're doing. Have that talk with your people. So once you learn, you can be the advocate by having that conversation in your community with your people, because it's your people who may be needing that conversation. And I'm saying across the board, not just for white people. Like there's some things that I need to learn as a Black person about other cultures. So even people having that talk with me, I'm receptive. Let's have that conversation because I don't know. I'm not exposed to it, as Brandon was saying earlier. So it's more of a thing of, I know the people I can share this information with, and they'll go actually continue to do their own research to further understand and not just base it off of one experience. And
so for me, I'm not disagreeing with what you guys said. The key in that was 100%. Like it's not 100% theirs to do it because you don't know. And so, like, you know, darkness doesn't go away with darkness. It goes away with light. Somebody has to expose the light, and you have to have an experience, right? People learn through their experiences. You were taught racism, not because you got up one day and said, I want to learn about racism. I want to go read a book. You were taught racism through your experiences. And the only way that you are going to change that is if you have a different experience. If you create a different narrative, and you can't do that necessarily just from reading the book. You can do part of it that way, but you also have to have an experience with a Black person. You have to be able to see, you know, more than BET. You have to have something that says, you know, this is what my past experience says may not be what the truth is.
And all of that again is all the isms are rooted in fear.
Yeah.
And it's that fear of the unknown. It's that fear, you know, going back to what Will Smith said, of standing on that ledge and that edge. It's that fear of, you know what, maybe everything Daddy taught me isn't true, or everything that Mama taught me isn't true. Maybe this experience with Zakiya has changed my whole paradigm on what Africans and Americans look like. wow, Dr. Krah, she did this. Wait a minute, but that's not what the caricature of a strong African woman is that's being perpetuated on TV. Oh no, I have to now deal with myself. And so it's easy to be scared in certain situations and be willfully ignorant because now I'm not challenged. It goes back to the quote. I'm not challenged now because if I am challenged, now the expectation is that I have to do something different. It's easy to give advice. It's harder to follow your own advice because once I give you your advice, I don't have to do anything with it. But when I have to listen to my self-talk, and it's like, man, and I'm scared because once I reach that plateau, now Brandon Davis' expectation of me is that I have to hit that again. And then also the fear comes in, if I don't hit it again, now I lose a relationship. And that may not even be Brandon's MO. But again, that fear has us, like a double dutch. Now we don't know what to do and what not to do. So you just stand there like this, and everybody else in the middle having fun and all that. You just on the outside like, okay, because you were scared to step in that arena. Because once you step in that arena, you open yourself up to everything. So as we continue to talk about fear, all of these things go back and rooted in fear.
And so I'm gonna add to that. So, I've been black all my life. I was born light skinned, but for most of my life, I've been caramel and been around black people. My whole family is black. I got some white people in there, but the blood people is black. And I didn't really understand black people until I went to college. Like when I went to Central, I was scared. I cried the first 2 weeks. Like I was super scared of the black people and my perception of what this was. This was hood. This was going to be ghetto. I was going to get my ass kicked. Like my perception of this was negative. All I could think was, I don't know why I'm down here with these niggas. I don't know what I'm doing here. We're gonna be honest. And so I didn't change my narrative because I got up and said I wanted to. I had to face my fear and go sit and talk with other people. I had to talk to my roommate who was from New York and learn that, he's a lot different from me and they do things way different than the way I grew up. He eats his we had an argument one time, this is just a side note, about the way we eat mashed potatoes or sweet potatoes. Or he eats it with a spoon, I eat it with a fork. And it was a real long conversation of, what do you mean you eat sweet potatoes with a spoon? And he's like, it's like mashed potatoes. I'm like, I've never heard of black people doing that. Black people don't do that. That's not real. But my experience changed because I talked to him. I've had mashed potatoes sweet potatoes that look like mashed potatoes. And now I can go and say, that's not that bad. Hey, I know black people who eat it like this. I know black people who eat it like this. I can cook it like that. I can put this on it. I just had sweet potatoes with salt and pepper on it. And I had my experience. Because of my experience, now I'm able to advocate and say like, hey, I know a different range of what black people can do. I know educated black people. We're not all ghetto. Like that was literally my experience before, was that, I knew black people in my family, but outside of the people that I know, I lived in the hood. So they were hood folks and they was ghetto. And so that's what I knew and I expected. And when I got to learn, like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm just like y'all just like me. And now y'all are doctors and lawyers and politicians and things like that. And that all came from experience and me facing my fear of going out and talking to people and having conversations with people who weren't like me.
I have to. I cracked up. The Ken know why. Brandon, I totally. I have been in predominantly white schools my whole life. I had did the whole thing of, oh, you talk a different way. I mean, all that stuff, talk white and all that. And so I remember when I had got my job, got the offer to come to Central State and work. And I remember telling a colleague, like, man, this is going to be a different experience for me. And it was a white colleague, like, I don't know how I'm going to fit in. And she looked at me, she gave me this kind of weird look she didn't understand. And in that moment, I understood why she looked at me, because she didn't understand I was going to a black college and I was black. She didn't understand why I wouldn't feel comfortable. And I explained it to her. I'm like, my whole entire life, I have been the one of 100, or the one of 50, the one of 5, and that's where my comfort level had been. Coming to Central State campus, I kid you not, I would walk around, because I came around end of July, beginning of August. I'll walk around. The moment I saw a white person, I'm like, man, okay, there's a white person. And because that's where my comfort level was. And at first I was like, I didn't understand why I felt like this kind of nervousness and fear. And so I met my good people here, Zakiya and Ken, who were on my team. And we would have different jokes at lunch, because there was things I didn't know. As Brandon was talking about, things that you learn from the experience. So we would have different conversations about different movies at lunch. And Ken would start talking about something, and I look away, because I was literally like, I don't know what he's talking about. And he's talking about something, and he would look so, you never heard of. I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, like black card revoked. Like that was a game before it really was a game. That was our game. And so in time, that particular experience, and I knew he was joking with me out of love. I didn't take it offense, but there were things I didn't know. There were things I didn't experience in my whole life. And so there was that fear. There was that fear of being accepted, because I always have been clowned. I always have been told, you're not white. I mean, you're not black because you speak a certain way. But then I was called, you darky, big lips, and all this other stuff in another vein. And I wrestled with my identity. So it was like this fear of being accepted or not being accepted. And it was just a whole hot mess inside. And so eventually I had to become comfortable in my own skin, and then decide how I would present myself. That if I never, understood a movie that, I guess a lot of black people watch, I stopped being afraid of being, judged. And once again, the people that I work with were not judging me, but I stopped kind of caring about that and being okay with who I was. And I think about right now, I had a friend that texted me the other day telling me that her child does not like the skin she's in because she's afraid of what that means in a larger sense. And so once again, being in that moment, or being in that time of coming to the HBCU where I was afraid of not being accepted, or afraid of not knowing certain things, or just afraid because I had never been around a lot of black people at the same time. And once again, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, black person, I'm afraid. It was just, I think it was more so afraid of who I was, or not knowing who I was and being accepted. And then now in this global nation and situations we're having in the society now, of people being afraid of their skin because of what it's now seen as in a negative sense. So, I mean, I totally feel you, Brandon, and I have my black card fully, Ken. So,
Well, one, I want my royalties from Hasbro, whoever took my idea. But let's look at it from the flip side. And fear is based upon experiences. And I've told you this, offline, but I'll say it again in front of the world. I was fearful and intimidated by you because you brought new ideas and fresh ideas to a team that we thought that we were doing it the right way. It was, it's that situation. We've always done it this way. Why bring something new to the table? And so even hypertribalism doesn't always come with skin color or nationality. Hypertribalism also comes with the environment. There was a situation that Zakiya and I, we grew up professionally in. That's what we knew. That's all we knew at that time. So that was our tribe. And so now you have somebody coming in to our tribe wanting to ruffle feathers. At the time, it wasn't, the environment was a very competitive environment that we lived in. And so it was looked at in our silos. If you don't have this idea or successful, then you don't know what you're doing. So the last thing we was going to do, now again, we never had this conversation, but this was the conversation in my head. The last thing I'm going to do is let somebody new come in with all these grandiose ideas and rock the boat, and then they looking at us funny. Now that I'm more mature, both more mature professionally and of age, man, we missed out on great opportunities to really give our students a more holistic view of life, a different worldview. And because we have been taught that as Black people, we are a monolithic group of people, even at an HBCU, there is still diversity. A person coming from Springfield is not the same person coming from Cleveland. And even as Zakiya and I, where she stayed at in Cleveland was different from where I stayed at in Cleveland, even though we were both on the east side. So it's all of these different nuances of tribes. And once you, again, stepping out of your comfort zone and saying, okay, and I love what Brandon said, because the more you say, it's more it's resonating. It's in me. There were external things that happened that is within me, but I brought that in the professional setting. Here's this young lady coming in and used to come in, hey guys, what about this? And I'm looking at you. I know me as Zakiya would just be looking at you like, no, that don't work here. And then we shut you down. Now you don't want to participate, and now there's things in you that we and again, I want to apologize. There may have been things that I've done, not intentionally, that may have stifled your professional growth moving forward, because you may be scared to pick up because of me shutting you down. And so I've apologized and everything's good. And I still got your black card on some of these things, because you ain't got away with all of it. But again, it's just one of those things that, going back to fear, we have to, I recommend, because I don't like to tell people they have to do, I recommend stepping out of your different comfort zones, stepping out of your different tribes, stepping out of your different silos, so therefore you can have a better worldview.
Good. And I think one of the things in that note, as you were speaking, Ken, about like, because of the experience you all had before I arrived at that space and me coming in, it's so funny. Like, even the maybe the shutting down or the lack, the not being receptive to the thoughts and ideas I had, I even within myself had to push and keep going. It's like kind of in that moment that if someone has shut you down, because not even knowing that there was fear or concern about anything or about what the culture was or things like that, in my mind, I'm like, well, no, I know this will work. I know I've seen it work. I've seen this and this and this happen. Blah, blah, blah. So in my mind, I had to even make a choice. Like, I know they shut that down, but I'm going to go another route with it. I'm going to come another way. Oh, maybe it didn't work this way. So that was my own kind of grit and motivation, because in that time in my life, I was like, I can't fit. Like, I'm afraid to fail. Like, I've done this. Like, okay, wait a minute. I have 3 degrees. This was in that moment. Like, wait a minute, I got 3 degrees. I have done this and this and this. I know this will work. So this can't fail. I can't come here and then this don't work. It worked at the University of Toledo, which is this big institution, blah, blah, blah. So I was even wrestling within myself, which was, now I could probably identify it as it being fear to fail in a place that in my mind, and I'll be honest, at the time, in my mind, I'm like, I was at the University of Toledo. This is Central State. So I'm not trying to knock Central State by any means. So people on the thing, I love Central State. I grew there in a lot of ways. So I want to be clear. But in my mind, I can't fail here. Like, that's not an option. And even being afraid to fail, if I fail here, then what am I going to do? Like, I left a place to come here and I have to keep going forward. So, I mean, I think there's even those aspects of fear that can be working at the same time in people you don't even know, which goes back to an earlier point we made, that we have thoughts in our mind about what other people are thinking and saying and believing about us. And that's creating this fear factor in us that may hinder us or it may push us forward, depending upon how we choose to look at it in that moment. So I totally get those points.
But I want to interject one thing, because you and Brandon had a similar experience. Is the fact that, again, you were taught, whether directly or indirectly, that who we are as a people is inferior. Because the fact of the matter is, when you come in and say, and this is your thought at the time, so we're not holding you to that thought, and I know for a fact you didn't come with this in a malicious way. But this is the University of Toledo, this Central State. That within itself was a learned behavior. When Brandon showed up, oh snap, I'm here and I'm in this area, like, wait a minute, that's a learned behavior. It was a little easier transition for me because I came in, I'm like, oh shoot, this is what this about. And it was in a good way. But then once I got to going, I'm like, wait a minute, I was told Central State was a party school. Monday through Thursday, it's boring as hell here. Guess what? They're about their work. They're about their business. They're about that. I'm like, oh, okay. And even when I have friends that come down from Ohio State and they was trying to, talk greasy, I'm like, whoa. This what we not going to do. I said, because just because you go to Ohio State, all you hang around is black people. You go to the Black Student Union, which is the worst building on campus, and that's where you hang out at. So don't fix your lips because you got this perception of O State. Intellectually, I'm getting with all y'all. So now what? When I work at different universities and they'll look just like, you graduated from Central State, I'm like, yeah, now what? Like, what are you trying to say? Because again, that's a learned behavior. And partly it was fear. I was scared to kind of speak up because I didn't want to. But then I had to remember this 93rd and Buckeye. At the end of the day, you can't whip my ass. So I carry that into every space I go into. I'm not a tough guy, but I carry that type of confidence because fear will stop you from even speaking up intellectually. So when they do that, that look like, oh, you went to Central State. Okay, yes, you at the University of XYZ. We in the same room doing the same thing. So now that we're past this, let us now go ahead and work together and be able to build. But again, it goes back to what we learned. And fear sets in when we entrench in that and we don't move past that to get a different worldview.
Every time Central State come out, we get a little hood. It's Buckeye. I love it. No, same for me. No, so I learned. So my family, well, they black, but so it was very black experience within the household. Like we always had black Santa Clauses, and I hated black Santa Clauses. Like I couldn't stand a black Santa Claus. I still don't really like them, but it was because nobody else had a black Santa Claus. Like outside of my house and my family, my friends are white, and they don't have black Santa Claus. He's not white. He's not black there. And so it made me out of place to have that conversation. And so, me learning that internal thing about Central State or about coming to an HBCU and feeling a certain way came from people telling me that that's who I was. I was putting on those students that the image that had been put on me, like, hey, listen, I'm going to a ghetto environment because I've been told that I'm ghetto. And now I'm around 1,000 different versions of me, right? And so that's where that came from. That fear came from, now people are going to look at me like what I've been fighting not to look like. I've been fighting to be a part of this other community and prove myself to be the white black person. And now I don't have a choice but to be black around in this area. And, I'm saying that as an incoming student, nothing changed necessarily about who I was. I just learned that, black comes in different forms. But coming in, I thought black needed to be a certain type of way. And I was scared. I had that fear of not knowing that black could be something else.
So in that particular narrative, like how do we begin to change? I know we had talked earlier about other cultures, maybe, teaching them of how they, learn and accept or learn and understand the narrative of the Black community. How do we start teaching our own selves and our own people the narrative to love the skin you're in, to not, feel like, because I still know, and we all still know that there is still the narrative of, white is right. If you do it this way, that's the right way to do it. And if you do it this way, then you're going to have multiple hurdles and all of this different stuff. Like, I mean, I think about like, so as you all know, my dissertation focused on the social identity development of white students at HBCUs. So I studied basically white students who choose HBCUs and the reasons why they do so and how they develop in that experience. And one of the things I remember seeing is different articles that talked to, white people about their why of attending HBCUs, and then Black people would have different kind of perspectives and things. And it was almost as if, kind of the point we were talking about earlier, there was this perception of you're going to something less than, but that wasn't just from white people, that was even from Black people that felt like they were going to something less than. So how do we start kind of educating each other on lifting us, like, we're not less than, we are different, but it does it have to be a scalable thing? So how do we start that kind of conversation more in our communities? Because it seems as though, and I'm not going to say always across the board, it's like when it comes to situations like what we've experienced in this past week, there's a reaction. So there's a reaction all of a sudden for some people, like, now I have this pride about being a Black person because you have now downed, or there's been this experience, this horrible experience to someone who looks like me. But why is it only when something happens? For some people, there's this reaction, like, is there something we need to do more of within our community of educating our children about being proud? Like, I guess I'm once again wrestling with that notion of, are people saying what we sometimes in ourselves feel about us, and even perpetuate in how we make certain statements about our own people, or statements about our schools, or things like that. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, it's a long, that's a whole nother podcast. But the cliff notes for me, it's really being your true authentic self. And it goes back to education and experience. I think we all have said that in different ways. I did not know about the LGBTQ community until I start hanging around people like that. So once you do that and you start learning what's offensive to them, I can't sit here and tell them what's offensive to them. I am not the expert, but I can be an ally. I can be an ally by shutting my mouth and listening. I can be an ally by understanding that in no community and in no tribe is it monolithic. Everybody doesn't think the same way. So when you have that education and you have those experiences, it helps reduce the fear to be able to continue to move on. Without the education and without the experience, you are stuck in your silo. You're stuck in your way of life. And you may have successes out of it, but you won't get the fear. And another thing is that when I say we, I'm using the broad brush, and I usually don't like doing that. We have to stop thinking that whatever we're saying is not really being done. So, for example, I'm gonna do a shameless plug for myself. Sorry, but I'm about in a hopefully later on this month, I've started to pull together my resources. So I have officers all across the nation, 7 of them, and we're gonna have a conversation. And it's not a conversation to bash. It's not, but I want the people that in my circle of influence to at least hear. When John Crawford got killed in Beaver Creek, I was so upset. I called my friend who's a Black cop in another state, and I'm like, man, how? I'm going off, and he was real quiet. He's like, well, he said, I know you're upset, bro. He said, but honestly, I'd have came in hot like that too. And I'm like, why would you do that? He said, because of the call he got. The person who's really responsible is the person who made the 911 call, because once a police officer is trained, they're trained to do a certain thing. He said, I necessarily wouldn't have pulled the trigger. He said, and it's wrong. They shouldn't have. He said, but I can understand. So it's not until you have a different experience. But my first real experience with the police was with a gun to my head. And so until we start having those different experiences to kind of put in context the totality of experiences, it's just a process. There are many people. The three of you are doing excellent work in each one of your areas of expertise. So I know for a fact the conversations are being had. So it's just me going out and saying, let me connect with like-minded individuals, so therefore we could come together and slowly, because everything happens slowly. Another thing, and I'll stop because I guess I got to keep myself under a time limit. The brown eye, blue eye experiment with Jane Elliott.
Mm-hmm.
I want everybody to look at that, black and white, because even that affects us as black people, and that goes back to the white baby, black baby experiment that was redone, I believe, in 2015 or 2017, and still people are still choosing the white baby as the prettiest baby. Why? Because we are in a systematic system that teaches us not to be proud of ourselves. It teaches us that our history started being less than, and that we were given these inalienable rights, as opposed to, no, we started in a whole nother continent that wasn't peaceful. So as for all you woke folk, Africa was not this utopia. It was wars in Africa. It was all those things. But as a society, we weren't allowed to evolve. Sir Walter Riley's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, that's another resource that people can look at. And it shows how we weren't allowed to evolve. So it's just a process that we just have to continue to educate and have experience. And I went over my time. I apologize.
So I'm gonna jump in because I know Brandon got like a lot of thoughts. I see it. Brandon. I'm gonna jump in too because I think Brandon might also touch on what I'm about to say. There were two videos that came out. One has probably maybe been a month or two ago, where a little girl was getting her hair done, and she said she didn't like the skin she was in, and she ended up being on TV. And I think it was her mother or someone who had to like really reassure her that she was beautiful as a young Black girl. And then there was another one recently I've seen within the past couple of days where a young girl was sitting at home crying. I think it was a male figure. I don't know if it's father, uncle, or whoever was comforting her. And they asked her why was she crying. She said, I'm sad because I can be hated for the skin I'm in. And this is a little girl. And so, like Ken said, this is a heavy conversation we have to have another podcast on, because it's a lot of how we change that. And I'm saying that because there were moments in my life where I never had that experience. And I attribute that to the way I was raised. So I was raised to love my Black skin. I was raised to love my Black community. I was raised to love my Black culture. I was raised knowing the Black culture did not start with slavery. I was raised knowing the Black culture has some royalty lineage in it. Like, I was raised knowing the depth and the true presence of what it is to be Black, of the African diaspora, and how diverse that is, and the various contributions to global society that has happened, to where I would say blessed to not have to go through a moment in my life where I was either I did not appreciate, or I did not love, or I did not value who I was as a Black woman. But then I also have had to make sure I did not allow society to tell me what was beautiful. I had to make sure I had prevented society to tell me that having long, straight hair, lighter skin, certain body features, whatever the case may be, was what was acceptable and necessary and needed for me to have value in this society. And I even tell that to where people ask me, like, why did I start growing my locks? I wanted to buck the system. I wanted to show that I can be successful and have locks. Now, when I did that, I had a lot of individuals tell me, you will not get a job. You will not be successful. You will be prevented. Like, it was so much stuff that came to me. I'm like, it's just hair. Like, for me, it's only hair. But since then, things have transitioned. So it's been 10 years and we progressed a little bit more in certain places. But I had to make sure I did my own internal work to block out what everyone else would tell me. And I know it's different as a child, because as a child, you start believing a little bit of everything because you hear it from so many different people, and they are so influential when it comes to their own peers that the peers will say something, and all of a sudden here we are having to undo 10 minutes of a negative conversation, and we may have spent the past 8, 10, 12 years trying to lift them up and feel valuable, feel wonderful, feel as if they belong, but it can be all undone in a 5-minute conversation as a child, or even sometimes some adults can be done that way too. So I think it really comes off what Ken was saying, like we have to do a lot of our own internal work. And I'm saying internal as in person, internal as in community, as internal as in culture, to really look at what are we telling each other about what beauty looks like. And I'm even saying that as our own people, but then also how do we tell the story of our value? And I think some of that ends up impacting how we can change the conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and let Brandon jump in.
No, I feel like you guys already touched on the head, and I don't want to repeat because I was going to say just the same thing. I'll just add these same things that were taught to us when we're talking about, are we good enough and judging ourselves. These same narratives are being taught to them, right? We're learning the same thing. Yeah, I'm Black, so I have that experience, and I can say, no, I've seen the Cosbys. There are Black people who are lawyers. There are Black people who are educated. There are Black people who are doing well. There are Black people who are living well and are great people. The majority of them are, not majority, all of them, but they're also that internal thing, that systematic thing that happens where I'm still learning that Black is not great in America. Black is not a value. This is not the thing to do. Even though I grew up in a house that definitely celebrated being Black, Santa Claus is Black, but I also had to leave and I had to watch the news and see that I've never forgotten this. When I first moved to North Carolina, I talked about it on my podcast. The first thing I saw on the news was a Black woman was in Cracker Barrel, and they threw food at her, and she was working at Cracker Barrel, and the people came in and threw food at her, and they kicked her out of Cracker Barrel. And it was a continuous thing. Cracker Barrel was always on the news in the 90s because they were throwing things at Black people. And I never ate at a Cracker Barrel. It was kind of like internally I had already processed, like, Black people don't eat at Cracker Barrels. Don't go there, because if I do, they're going to kick me out and throw food at me. And so that narrative was always there. It stuck with me. Nobody had to teach it to me. Nobody had to tell it to me. I learned it through my experience watching TV. I learned it the same way that the other side is learning it.
This is so good, y'all. This is so good. A question that I have that kind of draws all the different from all the conversations that we had this evening. Are you at a place in your life where you can say you have some strategies to overcome fear, whether it's the internal, external, like how in your personal life of all that you are, what are some kind of takeaways or strategies that you've begun to employ to overcome fear, whether internally motivated, externally driven, etc.? Or have you?
So this is a good way to close. I like this. So for me, I am not at a place where I've conquered fear. I don't think you'll ever conquer fear, because fear is it's an emotion that is there to warn you. And so it's always going to be there. You can't navigate away from having it, but you can. I want to say confront. I don't know if that's the word I want, but you can face it. There we go. All right, you can face fear, and you can say, like, I'm going to challenge it. And so that's kind of like what I said earlier. The tools I'm using to face my fear is acknowledging it, and saying, like, hey, I know that this is fear. I have to recognize that I'm scared of this. All right, and I have to call a spade and not be afraid to say, not try to name it something else. I'm not saying that straight is wrong, but not try to name anything else. For me, it is best for me if I just come in and say, let me stop right now. I am fearful of this. And so that is what's preventing me. And so that I'm not stuck in my fear, I can move forward knowing, saying, I need to face this and acknowledge what it is.
For me, I'm in therapy. I mean, and one of the things that my therapist talks about is negative connotations and positive connotations. And so my fear comes from situations that happen. And I've rehearsed in my head that I'm not good enough. Or I've rehearsed in my head that I'm not valued. These are things that I have rehearsed in my head. And what I have to learn and what I'm continuing to learn to do is to replace those thoughts with the truth. The truth is, I am valuable. The truth is that, yes, I came from a situation where I felt abandoned, initially by my father. And there were other relationships that I had really clinged on, and those people left me. So I deal with abandonment issues because it takes me back to a particular pain, to a particular PTSD. However, the truth is I am loved. The truth is that I'm not alone. The truth is I have resources. But however, when those traumas trigger, it goes back to what you, and this is where I do agree with you, Steph, whatever you claimed and named is now that root within you. So for me, it's therapy. For me, it's to understand that this particular situation did not work out for me professionally like I would have liked it to happen. That doesn't mean it was all my fault. That doesn't mean that I'm not confident and competent in the information, the things that I know. I had to get over my fear to ask you guys for resources. Like that was fearful because here I am older and I'm coming to you for help. But thankfully, I'm glad I treated you all well, at least well enough that y'all at least have me here. And I was able to have that relationship where I can, that trust was built. So for me right now, it's therapy. It's really continue to surround myself with people that affirm the truth as opposed to continue to perpetuate the lies. Or let me not, because everything, not perpetuate the negative things that happen that trigger the roots of a lie. Let me put it like that. So for me, it's therapy.
So, similar to Brandon and to Ken, so for those who don't know, that's where the Sankofa experience came from, is me utilizing past experiences to help me move forward. And a lot of my past experiences are either rooted in fear or in experienced trauma to where moving out of it prevents me from moving forward. So I name it, because if I don't name it, to me, I feel like I'm running from it or I'm hiding it. And I can't hide it because it ends up showing up in other ways to where it doesn't let me be who I am authentically. It prevents me from actually being that person to show up that needs to be present for whatever I'm called to do. So I name it. I tried therapy, didn't really work. I need to find a therapist because that was just wasting my money. But I also look at, what am I doing and why it is a fear? Like, where did it come from? And when I look at it from that perspective of understanding, like, where did this fear come from? Why am I holding on to it? Why am I giving it value? Why am I keeping it present in my life? It helps. It becomes like this peeling back the onion thing. Like, it could be one layer of fear, but when I keep pulling, I realize it's a deeper root of some type of fear, or even something else that I've never acknowledged. And once I do that, I'm able to recognize that I get to name it, and then I can overcome it. And I use that process just the way overall, like, it's so much that I can sit back and tell you, when I apply for a job or when I've spoken to somebody and I did a presentation last May, I was nervous, but I also realized that, one, the story I had to share was important and it was mine. But then two, who am I not to share this story, because it was somebody who needed to hear it to be able to show up and do what they needed to do within it. So I pull it back. I started uncovering and pulling and doing the hard, uncomfortable work and ask myself, why? Why is it there? Why am I holding on to it? Why am I keeping it present? As you would say, Stephanie, why am I naming it to give it life? And then in that aspect, let it go and move forward.
Definitely great points. I would say for me, as you all were talking, I was just reflecting, and it's funny. I was to kind of talk about it and how I've overcome it. Yesterday I was dropping my dog Daisy. Everybody knows I talk about Daisy, and I have pictures of her on my page. That's my baby. I was dropping Daisy off at the vet, and typically when Daisy sees a big dog, she like tenses up, and she like kind of literally is paralyzed because she had been almost attacked by big dogs before, and so she typically runs away and just kind of hides or jumps on me. Yesterday when we went into the vet, there's this person with two big dogs. I seen the dogs, and I was trying to like, okay, maybe I need to go another way, and I couldn't go another way because there were other big dogs the other direction I was going to go. So I stood back for a minute, and just she was kind of sniffing around. And the guy that had the big dogs that were kind of where we needed to go, he had moved them. And I went to go sit down, and I'm just kind of watching her. And Daisy just continued to be about her, like was sniffing around, moving around, kind of looked at the dogs, but kept doing whatever she was doing. And in that moment, I'm like, did my dog kind of teach me a lesson? Like she literally, I did not see any fear in her. And what it said to me in that moment, and I believe that like God could speak to us in various ways. And I felt what it was in that moment, that my dog somehow overcame her fear of big dogs. It doesn't mean that every time she sees a big dog that she won't kind of have that quick reminder of what had happened to her before, but she no longer was allowing for it to paralyze her in that space. And so as I've been experiencing different things recently, kind of stepping into opportunities that I've never been in before, when I feel like, when I'm about to walk in, each morning, I pray for clarity. I pray for guidance. I pray for my hands to be used in a diligent way, that they are going to be useful, influencing people in different things. And so when I do feel any creep up, I ask myself, what's going on in this moment? And when I stop and kind of have that like that internal talk, it's like I catch myself, because whatever's trying to creep up, or if it's fear that's trying to creep up, the thing that's creeping up is actually the unknown versus like there's nothing to be afraid of. And I tell myself that, like, Stephanie, these people aren't checking for you in this way, or don't have this full-fledged conversation that hasn't even happened. Like, stop it. And it's really me kind of owning who I am, loving who I am, believing in myself, believing in every book I've read, every research I've done, everything about me. Like, if you are judging me, I don't care, because I'm okay. I'm fine with who I am. And I think, once again, going back to that experience that I have with, like I said, with Daisy, is that the experiences she had before were no longer affecting her. The experiences I had before, where people were judging me, or people were questioning me, or people were looking at me side eye, I will not allow that to stop me. So I have to really kind of own who I am, own the experience that I have had in the past, but not continue to allow that to hinder me. So that's, once again, I also not that I'm running away from it or denying that fear exists. I'm just more so will not allow for it to paralyze me in the moment and not choose to move forward, because I knew, and even as I think about Daisy, there was something that needed to be happening. She was there for a reason. She had a procedure she had to get in order for her to be healthier. I am where I am for a reason. There's something that I need to get. There's someone, as Zakiya said, that needs something from me. So if I am paralyzed, if I'm afraid, if I choose not to move forward, there is something that I am missing out on, and there is something that others are missing out on from me not showing up. So that is kind of my techniques that I'm working on day in and day out. I don't have it completely mastered. I'll also say prayer. Y'all, God has been good, and he has continuously worked in on me to purge me from whatever it is that I've allowed to hold me back, because the world needs us. The world needs everyone that is tuning in, everyone that's watching this on replay. And if you make the decision to not show up because of what has happened to you in the past, or not show up because of what you think the next is going to be, then you are allowing for your life to not be, totally fulfilled, and you not stepping into your purpose and call of who you're supposed to be. So don't let fear do it to you, and you take control of it. You say, no, not today. And you move forward and take that next step.
Amen.
All right.
So I want to say thank you to those who have stayed with us, because we tried to make this into an hour, but we are now at 1 hour and 45 minutes. So we do thank you all who were with us the entire time. Those who kind of stepped away came back. We will be back with another episode. So please stay tuned. Brother Ken, we appreciate you
Yeah.
for this conversation. I always love when you drop your insights.
I want to say I appreciate
I
you
do
all.
appreciate
it. And I love you. I love each and every last one of you. Thank you so much. Continue the good work. And everybody who, your lives are going to be changed for listening to these 3 dynamic individuals. So continue to keep pushing. Don't let fear to stop you, because you all are great and we are all interconnected. So I'm grateful and humble to the 3 of you. Thank you. It was more of a pleasure for me than it was anything else. So thank you.
Can you all remind everyone, how can they follow your podcast and connect with you on different mediums?
Well, what you can do now, I'm streaming on all platforms. We post every Tuesday, and you can also find me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all at Ken's Corner. Please hit me up. Got some other good things in the work, and I'm just thankful and humble for the experience, just to be able to do that.
So similar, you can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, the Anchor app as well. Type in Sankofa, Sankofa Experience with the brackets and the E. You will find me there as well. And of course, if you're on my page right now, you can follow my Facebook, Sankofa Xperience Network, for also updates regarding the podcast.
I am everywhere you want to be. So you can follow me Facebook. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter. It's all highly revered. You will find me on any platform as well. Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, everywhere. So look me up.
And
I'm sorry, one more. www.kenscorner.co, my website. If I don't mention that, I'm going to get beat up.
Make sure you got to cover all bases. Of course, Free Your Mind with Dr. K is my podcast. Free Your Mind Enterprises is my LLC. www.fyme.com is my website. Make sure, hold on, sorry. You can follow me on Anchor, Podbean, Spotify. Definitely excited and want for you all to connect with me. So yeah, I am so happy to be on the platform with these wonderful people, and for everyone who's joining us this evening. I apologize. I gave you my website. I said .com.org, fyme.org is my website. So yeah. Any final words, folks? Are we out?
In the words of Dr. Thomas, I love, trust, and respect each and every last one of you.
Yes, Dr. Thomas.
What's your final words you say on your podcast, Zakiya?
Keep living your Sankofa experience. Reach back and move forward.
Brandon?
I say, well, okay, all right.
And my typical closeout on my podcast is continue to free your mind. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you. Love y'all.